In this video on Google Sheets, I'm going to show you how to use Boolean statements. A Boolean statement is an expression that will either evaluate to be true or false. It's binary, one or the other. I'm going to show you the basics of that, as well as a lot of is statements that you can use to evaluate a lot of different inputs into Google Sheets to evaluate whether or not a certain cell rings true or false. Let's get started. First thing we need to do is give an example of what a Boolean expression might look like. We've already looked at things like simple equations, like let's say equals 1 plus 2, and that of course is going to solve out to be 3. But instead of doing the plus, I'm going to change that to be greater than. What you'll notice is that it's not solving anything, it's simply saying true or false. If I was to do 1 is less than 2, we can see that that one changes it to true. So I'm getting a binary. It's either going to be true or it's going to be false. I can try that with some other things. Like let's say I put the number 1 here, and now I'm going to evaluate this. If this is greater than 5, you'll see right now it's true. If I was to change it to 3, but if I go to 6, all of a sudden that is going to change the value of that. So I have a Boolean statement here, and this cell is either going to be true or false depending upon the contents of this. Let's show some other examples. Here I have a bunch of different statements that are all going to evaluate to a Boolean true or false. Let's go through these one at a time. By the way, I have the formula right here, and I have the background, a conditional formatting, so that we can better evaluate what is true and what is false based on whether or not it's going to be green or red. Before we get started, I also want to show this last column here is what the formula actually looks like. By the way, in case you're wondering why this is showing up as to what the formula looks like instead of running the formula, if in here you put a little apostrophe, now it's going to treat this as text. If I remove that, now it's going to try to evaluate it. Putting that little apostrophe there means that Google Sheets doesn't actually try to run that as a formula. In this first cell here, I'm going to be evaluating whether or not B2 is actually going to be a statement that is an n/a. And you get that occasionally when you have something that is going to fail when it's going to look something up. I'm going to show a failed VLOOKUP right now, more on those later, to show how it's suddenly going to change this Boolean statement from false to true. Now, what I have right here is it's actually doing a VLOOKUP against a named range, in this case my Star Wars Legos, and it's telling me that the name Darth Vader is actually a piece with 397. Now, if I was to change the name of it to something that doesn't exist, like let's say Darth Vader 2, all of a sudden it's going to ring this as an NA. It's essentially saying, hey, we couldn't find that one. My Boolean statement right here is saying this is true because it is now evaluating that cell and it's saying it did not find it. So it's saying not available. So all of a sudden these cells here went from red to green, saying that now the statement here is an n/a. If I go in and change it, it reverts back to there. Let's look at another one. This one here is automatically green because it's going to be evaluating whether or not this cell is blank. Right now, of course, it is blank, but if I put something in it, all of a sudden, it's going to change that from true to false. Anytime something has any text, it doesn't matter if it's going to be text or numbers. If it's blank, it's going to ring true. If it's not, it will ring false. This next one here is where we're going to start getting a little bit more specific. This one is going to be saying whether or not it's text. So I'll try putting in some text here, and you'll see that it's going to ring true because now this is text. However, if I was to put in a number, it would ring false. It is looking for text, only letters, no numbers. Symbols will also treat it as that, but numbers are not. Next one down here is pretty simple. It's looking for if something is an email. That, of course, is an email. That, of course, is not. This one here is an error, something other than n/a. So I'll try my VLOOKUP from before. Here it's ringing as an NA. So it's looking for an error other than NA. This one, of course, isn't. Let's try an error that is something other than that. If I'm trying to divide by 0, that's going to be an error there. It's going to say, error, you cannot divide by 0. So it's throwing a different type of error. So this is going to ring true. This one is going to be any kind of error. So it's going to be NA or something else like this. That, of course, means nothing. 5?6, that's something where I mistyped it. So anytime it's something where you just mistyped, this one will catch that. Next one, pretty simple. It's be looking for stuff that's even. Why is it green, you might ask? Well, it's treating this blank cell here as a 0. If I put in the 0, it's going to do that. Odd, Of course not. So it's going to treat a blank cell essentially as a zero entry, therefore it's going to be even. Next one, simple. If it's odd, it'll be that. If it's even, it'll be false. Next one is looking for if something is a formula. Let's try here. If I do just 1 plus 2, that is not a formula. It's saying it's false because I forgot to add the equal sign. I do that and suddenly it's now going to ring true. So anytime you have an equal sign and then it's performing some sort of formula calculation, this will ring true. The next one is looking for whether or not a statement is going to be true or false. So it's looking for Boolean statements. So it is a Boolean statement on a Boolean statement. Let's say this particular cell is true. Now it's going to do that. If it's false, now it's going to do that. Even if I was to do 1 or 0, it's not going to treat those. It's specifically looking for true or false. Next one is looking for something that is non-text. So if I try some text right there, it's going to ring false. I do something like that, that is going to ring true. So that's kind of the opposite of this one that is text. Symbols are also going to be treated as non-text. This one here is looking for numbers and numbers only. There's a number, that's not a number. And finally, this one here is going to be looking for whether or not something is a valid URL. If I was to type Google, nothing. Google.com, now that is a URL, so it will ring true. So all these different statements are going to change based on this, and it's going to evaluate whether or not something is true or false. I'll go into more of what that means later on in some wonderful applications of this, but for now you need to know the basics. Boolean statements, either true or false.